Hi, welcome back to another episode of the Savor Food and Body podcast. Today I am talking to Deanna Schober. She is the co-founder of Built Daily and co-host of the 5-star rated Fitness and Sushi podcast alongside her husband Tony. Together, they have helped thousands of women break the yo-yo diet cycle and get their health on track and achieve their naturally healthiest weight by healing their relationship with food, their bodies, exercise, and their minds. Deanna and I have been talking back and forth through me being on her podcast, on the Fitness Sushi podcast, as well as like just some collaborative conversations too. And we're very much aligned. And what I'm excited to share with you today is Deanna is a great example of someone, and her husband, I guess, too, that was steeped in diet culture, doing all the things. And she may even describe it as having a full-blown eating disorder, maybe undiagnosed, and then how to make that switch into intuitive eating. And what I think is going to be really impactful about this conversation, because we've talked about other individual stories, but Deanna is a coach. She is a professional in this space, and she's going to share with you what that was like to do that 180-degree pivot and recognize the darkness of diet culture and the unsatisfaction and all of that, and then switch over to intuitive eating. So Deanna, thank you so much for being here today to kind of share this, somewhat vulnerable story, really. And I appreciate your willingness to share your experience with our audience.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. I like being vulnerable. I find that it connects you to people, and I get excited about that. So I'm very happy to be here.
That's awesome. Well, let's just start with, how about just describing your personal relationship with food and exercise, say since high school? Like, walk us through this journey of what you went through.
Well, by the time I got to my freshman year of high school, I was already in a full-blown eating disorder. Like, it was definitely not looking undiagnosed, but I wasn't eating. I stopped eating by my freshman year, and it was a way to deal with the anxiety of being in a new school where I didn't know anyone, and I had joined the drill team, and we had to weigh in because we were all supposed to be the same weight. And so the combination of those two things it just triggered something that I think was already probably brewing in me. And I stopped eating for like a very good amount of time. I would eat, just enough. And it was really weird because I think that my eating disorder at the time, something that I realize now that I didn't realize for probably 20, 30 years, was that it was sanctioned by diet culture. I mentioned to my mom once, like, I've lost all this weight, I'm losing weight. And instead of being like, oh, that's weird, you're in high school, that shouldn't be happening. It was the culture of women to be excited for other women. And so she was like, oh, and I could tell that she was trying to be careful and she didn't know what to say, but it was just, that's the culture. And so she said something like, well, how did you do it? And I was like, oh, I'm just making better choices in the cafeteria, and just BSing my way through that. Cause that I knew I knew that was a problem. The fact that I had completely stopped eating in order to fit into this weigh-in at school. But it was really the norm for girls to be trying to lose weight, and that wasn't seen as a problem. This followed me. I think I just kind of stopped doing that after, I got settled in at my school, and I recovered. I started eating again. I don't even think that I recovered. I started eating again. I don't think I ever recovered. My relationship with food and my relationship with my body was always a problem. It was always on my mind. Going into my 20s, where I was having children, and I became a mom at 21 years old, like right after my 21st birthday. And those disordered patterns followed me after each pregnancy, and constantly on like a yo-yo diet cycle. And then got divorced, met Tony. And he was, I was like, the divorce was really messy. It really knocked the self-esteem out of me. Any ounce of self-esteem that I had left, it really, there was infidelity on his part, and really took that out of me. And so I was really left feeling vulnerable. And so when I met Tony, and he's this like hot guy, and I'm 32 years old, I've got 3 kids under the age of 10, and this guy is like interested in me, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I have got to do everything in my power not to lose him. Everyone who, all of them meant well. They were all like, wow, this guy's come in and he is interested in you. You have 3 kids. They didn't mean it like that, but it was like, the implication was that I was lucky to have him. And so I had like, the pressure was just back on to maintain this body. When I met him, I was at the end of a yo-yo diet cycle, the part where you lose the weight, not where you've gained it back. And so I was like, oh, I got to keep this body. There is no way. And he was into bodybuilding. And so he and I together, very long story short, and I can dive into this more, but very long story short, we came together and he was definitely struggling with binge eating disorder at the time. He had, with the bodybuilding aspect, would get really lean, and then he would put 30 pounds on in a month through binging. He would like lose willpower and just start binging, and it would go on for a good amount of time, and then he would go through the cycle again and again and again. And I started to diet with him, and I would binge with him too, not to the degree that he did, but the two of us together were just a mess. And then through all of this, you mentioned at the beginning that we were in diet culture. We were diet culture. We were a huge part of the problem. And this is all going on behind the scenes. We are, after we got married, had started a weight loss company online, that we were one of the early adopters of blogs. And we were like, Tony was getting asked to do interviews on like the Today Show. We were on like the top 3, Google search engines for weight loss. And it was, this huge thing. And behind the scenes, we are just falling apart. So we got fed up after, we hit rock bottom, I think, together. We got fed up and went on a healing journey together, eventually walked away from that version of that business, and started the company that we own now, which is Built Daily, where we help other people to heal in the way that we did. So I tried to shorten that as much as possible. That's a long story.
Excuse me. And it is a long story. I mean, for all of us, right? I mean, if you're talking about your first introduction to diet culture, diet mentality, negative body image, we're talking pre-high school, which is the commonality, to be honest, was with me. As soon as we hit puberty and our bodies start to change, we start bumping up against that, like, oh, be careful about your weight conversation. And, for you, there's so much there. There's tying it to the drill team, tying it to, which the way you said it is we're all supposed to be a certain weight. To me, I thought that was really interesting because I have a current client who is a cheerleader, and it's not as much about them all being a certain weight, but there's a persona that goes with being a cheerleader. There is a body type, there's a look, there is a style. And so just that piece of it, I always go back to like, I don't know how a coach can endorse that. But again, coaches are also swimming in diet culture.
Right.
So, and there is, if we want to say an industry standard, a sports standard to do that sport. It was the same for me with competitive marathon running. Competitive marathon running, particularly road racing, is this type of body. This is the type of body that wins races. Or in drill team, this is the type of body and weight that is competitive at the state level, or, whatever it might be in high school. But the other things that you said too, that I think are worth highlighting is your mom kind of stumbling around like, I don't really want to endorse this for her, but this is what we do as 20th century women. And this is how we bond. And maybe this is what she wants. So as her mom, I'm trying to be supportive, so again, moms, swimming in diet culture. This is one of the reasons that I love working with women in midlife, because we're kind of the gatekeepers to stop that generational cycle.
Right.
Although you didn't mention if your mom was also having her own journey of diet, cycling and yo-yo dieting, but just that, do I support my daughter? Do I not support? Like, what's going on? The other piece that you didn't say explicitly, but I think this is important for folks to hear, is that nervous system regulation response. You're in a new school, super stressful. It's high school. You're trying to find your tribe. You're trying to find your people. You're trying to fit in. You're trying to fit into the drill team. You're just trying to fit into your identity, finding an identity. And that's super stressful on our nervous systems. And it can go either way for people. Sometimes people binge eat to account for that nervous system response. Sometimes we just shut down completely. We're not hearing hunger. We're not hearing satisfaction cues. We're not hearing any of that. We just kind of give up on the whole food thing. That interoceptive awareness around food just kind of shuts down because we're in survival mode trying to find our people. So I wanted to really name that because, as you mentioned, then going in through yo-yo cycling, yo-yo diet cycling during pregnancies, like those are also times of stress as well as body changes. And so to kind of put this all in the context of like none of that part of your story, there's nothing in there that's your fault. It's all cultural. It's all learned experiences from the culture and interpretation and all of that. And then it also kind of makes total sense, like meeting Tony and going, this guy's amazing. He's willing to take on a young mom with 3 young kids. I don't want to lose that. So if he's into this, I'm going to do that too, especially coming off of being, the, how did you say it? The self-confidence kind of being down the drain from your divorce and your breakup. And so totally makes sense. Like, why wouldn't you clam on to a really great guy and want to show up for him physically? Again, this is what we're trained to do, show up physically so that we remain attractive, independent of whatever messages the guy's giving or not. He may not be actively participating in that. Plenty of guys are, but maybe he wasn't. But again, we kind of make that as those assumptions as women of I have to show up a certain way so this guy keeps liking me or wants to marry me. And I think that's something that I see a lot in my clients, and I hear a lot from other women in midlife, that is really at the part of the root of that fear of weight gain in midlife. We're afraid of how that's going to affect our relationships.
You just hit me in the chest right there. Yes. That's so huge. I think midlife is like that. We're so afraid. We're so conditioned. There's so much going on with all of this, but the big thing that you just hit on is we are so conditioned that we have to be young and beautiful, and that's what makes us special. And we have to be sexy for men. And none of us are even thinking about whether we want to be sexy. It's just about how we're perceived by the male gaze, whether we're interested in men or not. I mean, it's so pervasive. And that is, the patriarchy has so much to do with this. And we talk about the patriarchy a lot in our program because we're not even aware of this. We're not even aware of how it's affecting our body image and the way that we see ourselves, and that we spend our lives and the majority of our energy holding ourselves to the standard that we've never stopped and been like, wait a minute, do I even want this? Does this even matter? I don't know that any of it does matter. I think that maybe, it's like, you wake up to it. I always think about Neo in the Matrix when he pulls the plug off of his head and he stands up and he's looking around. He's like, oh, this is reality. That's how I think a lot of my clients feel after they stop and examine these things and how they have affected their relationship with their body, their self-worth, which in turn affects their relationship with food, because that's how you control it. That's the response.
Absolutely. And this midlife space, an age, season of life, is this unraveling. And just like you just described, it's the unplugging. I'm unplugging from the way that I've done things all these years, because suddenly a light bulb goes on. somewhat fear-based because we're watching our body. Our biology is just doing what she does. And we may not, we don't like it most of the time. It is a roller coaster, but we're then forced to move into this conversation with ourselves and realization of like, oh, okay, shit's getting real. I am not going to be the same person for the rest of my life. And I'm going through this transition. What do I want to take with me from my younger self into my more seasoned wise woman self? What am I
Mhm.
ditching? What am I leaving behind? And to do that, it is an unraveling and part of that process. And so in thinking about that, I'm curious, like, what was it like for you to kind of unravel and transition from being that a proponent of diet culture,
Mhm.
being the weight loss platform, and transitioning into being the anti-diet and intuitive eating coach that you are now?
Oh, such a great question. I mean, like, I think the word that comes to mind is liberating. It was terrifying. I mean, when you're doing as well as we had sold out coaching. We were number 3 on Google. We were like, things were happening, and we were at the same time, we were so miserable because it was just like, there was a series of events, including the loss of my dad, where it just like put this all into perspective, where it was just like, this is not it. And financial abundance doesn't necessarily mean happiness. It's like it wasn't in alignment with what we were learning about ourselves, about our clients. We were seeing all these things, and once you wake up to it, it is hard to put the plug back on the back of your head and go back to sleep. You don't want to when you realize how magical it is. So it was really scary, terrifying, but totally liberating, and the best decision of my life. I mean, I would never go back. You couldn't pay me to think about food as much as I was thinking about it. You couldn't pay me to think about my body as much as I was thinking about it. And I'm not perfect, and I don't think that anybody ever gets to a place where they just never think about what their body looks like. Like you were saying, there's a lot of big questions that are coming up, like, oh, I really do have a limited amount of, I was 37 when I was like, oh, I have a limited amount of time on the planet, and this is not forever. What do I want to do with my life? And it's really interesting to kind of start to unravel that, and you go through this metamorphosis where you start to really examine your values, what it is that you do value in life. And I don't know, I didn't want to get to the end of my life and still be thinking about these things and still be fighting with my body. I think that the process really showed me that my body was my home, and it was a place for me to have physical experiences, good and bad and strange. That's all I can describe, being 46 is like, sometimes it's strange, and I'm sure that it's just going to get stranger, but the uh, it's a place where I do get to have all these amazing experiences, and it's not my business card or my identity, like all of who I am, but it is my home, and it is, I want to take care of it, and I want to have those positive experiences and be present for even the negative experiences in it, because that's what it is to be human, and I want to get the best out of all of that. So I think liberating, because it was this journey was the catalyst for me, I think, to find what I truly value in life, and what lights me up, what makes me feel alive, what makes me feel like I am fully living. And I think that, I was always so worried about quality of life, quality of life, quality of life. And I was only thinking physical. Like, my health has to be perfect. I've got to have perfect heart, perfect lungs, perfect everything. And that also comes from, a lot of anxiety. So I think getting away from that idea and balancing that out with, like, I do want to feel great, but I also want it to, like, not think about the stuff, and I don't want to get to the end of my life and be like, yes, you perfectly had your health and you sacrificed everything else because of it. So it's been a really big wake up call for me. And another aspect of this, I think, that's interesting that you kind of mentioned, was the nervous system regulation. I discovered after having 4 kids that every single one of them is neurodiverse. We have everything in my family from autism to ADHD. I finally was like, I didn't know any of these things weren't normal. And I went and got diagnosed with severe inattentive ADHD, which means I have problems regulating my nervous system. And so, just this journey took me on down that road too. I started to look back and see all the times that I had used dieting or food to regulate my nervous system because I wasn't good at it. My brain isn't good at getting myself out of fight or flight. I am very emotional because my nervous system gets flooded with emotions. So that's a thing that I have to deal with. That just having that knowledge and that self-knowledge put together with all of these other things has been, a huge game changer where I feel like I get to live life on my own terms and I understand myself now on some level.
I think that's one of the things that people often miss, especially around the body image piece, because they think, well, when I'm thinner, life will be better. But we often forget is, well, yeah, but what's it taking to be thinner or to try to be achieving that perfect health? Are you really living your life when you're living by counting calories, counting macros, counting ketones, whatever, recording everything, tracking your workouts? Is that living? And I'm not here to judge if someone says, yes, that is my ideal living. Like, I'm super passionate about that. Okay, cool. Go on with your bad self. I'm not here to judge that, but just more to a strong basis of my work is asking people to be reflective, have some mindfulness. Again, going back to what you said earlier, is this what you want? If it's what you want with full body authenticity and it's aligned with your values, cool. But if it's not, if you're doing it for other reasons, then what's the point? Are you going to get to your 80s, your 90s and go, yep, I sure wish I had done that diet. I didn't try that one. I wish I could go back and try that one. So being able to have that liberation and that self-reflection and getting to know yourself through that liberation of ditching diets is huge. I see this happen with my clients and group members all the time, in that we start off just talking about food and it ends up unraveling this rest of the part of their life. It trickles into their relationships. It trickles into their jobs. It trickles into their hobbies, or maybe they want to go get some different hobbies that don't have to do with changing their body, at least from that aesthetic place. It's coming maybe more from an empowerment place or a confidence boosting place or something like that. So, but I'm curious too, what was it like? Because you guys had such a big platform. I mean, Tony, Today's Show, like, hello. So you had this huge following. What was that like to pivot in front of all those people, in front of that audience, not only be pivoting yourselves and your own like health journey, health recovery, but you're pivoting this big business that you had built and the community that goes with that. What was that process like?
Terrifying. It was, when something is supporting your family and your 4 children, and you're talking about like, it's not working anymore. I mean, to say I had so much trust in the universe. I'm a spiritual person, not religious. I am very spiritual. I had so much trust in the universe that this felt right. It felt right for me, and therefore it was going to feel right for the right people, the people who are ready for it. And I mean, I was right to some degree. We didn't have the huge, we no longer have this like huge following where we're getting 2 million visitors to our website every month the way that we were. But what we do have is this core community of people who stuck around with us, and they were interested in it, in the evolution of what we were going through. They recognized a lot of what we were saying. We tried to stay a few steps ahead of what we were letting people know about, so that we had gotten through, and we're still that way, so that we had gotten through some part of that journey and we had perspective on it, and then we could share what we had learned. And so that was our approach, was like, we've been thinking about some things. Some things are not working for us. They weren't working for us at all. They don't seem to be working for our clients either. I actually sent out an email right after my dad died. The year that he died, on New Year's Eve, I sat down and wrote out like a mission statement to my email list and was just like, I have seen the light, you guys. I'm never going back. Weight loss is not the most important thing in the world. I can't do this anymore. And this is the direction I'm going. Are you with me? If so, let's go. Like, I'm going to figure this out with you. And I got a huge response to that. And I got some people who left, and that was okay. They weren't in that place yet. I wasn't always in that place. If I had heard something like that when I wasn't in that place, I probably would have put my blinders on and walked away as well. So it was really, it was a spiritual experience, because I think that what we learned from that, looking back, is that you have to be in alignment with what you're doing. You can't, it doesn't matter how much money you're making. If you're not in alignment with it on internally, you will be miserable, and you will attract people who make you more miserable. Like with the people that we were attracting in when we were talking about weight loss, they were really focused on weight loss. God bless them. And the way that their body looked was whether they lived or died. It was just that serious to them at the time. And I get that, because that was where I was at. But that was what we were attracting. We were attracting that surface level thing. You know, like you had mentioned, when I had the six pack and the body that I thought that I had dreamt of my whole life, there was this like level of happiness. It was like a hit. It was like the same way that you get a hit of drugs or a hit of alcohol or a hit of gambling. Like there's this like hit that happens, and you're like, ooh, that feels good. And then you want more and more and more of it, and it's never enough. And that's because it doesn't fix anything. It's just this, and it's hard to say that to people who've never had it, because they probably are like, well, I'd like to find out, you know, like the same way a millionaire who's like, money doesn't make you happy. It's like, oh, I'd like to find out if that makes me happy or not. But that was my experience. And so those were the people that I was attracting, the people that wanted that hit. And so when we made that shift and we were vulnerable and said, we had it wrong, guys. And this is the reason that I love being vulnerable now, is because I had such a good experience with that. The people who were gone, and that was fine. The people who stayed were so special, and we were so connected, and they have watched us through this journey, gone along on their own journey. We have people in my program now who have been around since 2011 when we started. The business was called Coach Calorie. So who they started with in 2011 with us, and now they're in our program, and they have been on this journey with us for, what is it, 12 years at this point almost. So yeah, it's magical. I mean, the thing, you're afraid of losing something, but the thing that you lose is not really that valuable anyways to you if you're not in alignment with it. And the thing that you gain is so much better than you ever could imagine, and so much more deep. And like when I talk about happiness, like the happiness of the six-pack body and money, you know, having a bunch of money compared to the absolute peace and joy of knowing that you are doing exactly what you're meant to do, and that what you're doing means something to someone, and that it's truly changing their life in the same way that it truly changed yours. That has been, I mean, one of the best lessons of my entire life. And so this was one of the best decisions I think that we have ever made for both Tony and I can say that pretty definitively.
That right there. And I'm going to encourage people to rewind that, listen to that story again, because that is one of the most beautiful unraveling stories I think I've heard. And yeah, it relates to a business, but it also relates to you and Tony as people too. Yeah. And that speaks volumes that fairly large percentage of your community, like you said, there's people that drop off. It wasn't for them. But still, you've shared some numbers with me. And so I know it's a fairly large percentage of your community stuck with you. Mm-hmm. And that speaks to, one, the power of vulnerability, and two, like not being afraid to unravel something that isn't working. Yeah. But not to ditch it completely and just go, okay, well, we're not going to be coaches anymore. We're not going to do this work anymore. We're going to, I don't know, go to law school or something like that, completely different. Yeah. You guys still, that pivoting, that unraveling, so that it was still part of your core value to help people find their own definition of health and their
Right.
own definition of well-being. So I'm wondering, how has your lived experience by doing this unraveling and transitioning from dieting to intuitive eating, how has that helped you support your clients and your group members that much more? What has that shown up? How has that shown up in your program?
Well, when you go through this process yourself and you start to like just talk about it to client, it's a slow evolution. At first, I'm just like, I've been learning that if I give myself permission to eat anything I want, that I'm able to make whatever choice I want, and just sharing that with people and them going, oh wow, yeah, okay, that's makes sense. I'm going to try it, and it works for them. And you see that over and over and over again, and you start to realize that the thing that you have gone through is so universal just on a human, like this made me so interested in psychology that I am in school getting a degree in it, because it was just so fascinating to see like this is reproducible on a human level for almost anybody, because this works with our psychology. So when you see that, you can start to go back and kind of what's the word? I'm never going to come up with the word because that's the ADHD. Um, you
Reflection or reflection or
you put together, you can go back and pull apart what happened for you and put it back
oh,
together.
reconstruct,
Yeah,
reconstruct it.
reconstruct. Thank you.
Yeah,
Reconstruct what, and reverse engineer. There it is. What
right.
ah people who listen to my podcast are like, this is Deanna's thing. She always can't remember her words. Reconstruct that process and reverse engineer it for someone else who's going through it, and pretty, with some obviously everybody's going to have their own experience with that, and they have to take it at their own pace, but those steps are reproducible. So now I've got a system that I can lay out for somebody and say, first, you need to deprogram diet culture. That's step one in our process. You need to get out of your head these lies that you've been told over the years, that this is your fault, that you can't stick to things, that the reason that you can't stop eating chips is your fault. It's not. It's your intense relationship with food. And just that whole idea of forcing behavior change, and those things that are just putting band-aids on the problems rather than getting down to the root and seeing what's actually going on. You deprogram those ideas out of their head. You heal their relationship with food. You heal their relationship with their body, with exercise, and with their mind, which is just, getting out of that diet mindset. There's a formula that most everybody can follow. And with some help, find that freedom and that liberation to be able to forge whatever healthy choices you want to make, not what someone else thinks that you should, not what some invisible standard that we should all be, striving for, but what that looks like for you, for your personal life, your schedule, your era in life, wherever you're at this season of your life, and what you like and what you don't like. If you don't like spinach, you don't have to eat spinach. There's all these things that the formula and the principles are all the same, but what that creates for the individual is something that is completely personal. It's not black and white. It's completely personal to you. And none of my clients, none of their outcomes look the same as the other one. They all look completely different from each other, because they're all different people with different life circumstances, different jobs, different families, different genetics. So, but that's beautiful. But that's what dieting gets wrong, is trying to fit everybody into this cookie cutter lifestyle, where this is such a personal thing. And all these other factors come in, like neurodiversity and the other factors that we don't think about that are happening to the whole person, where, dieting is just looking at that very black and white, what are you eating and stop eating that, those kind of very black and white rules. So for my clients, that's the formula is something that we're supporting them through. And then the outcome looks totally different for each and every one of them.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that is important to notice there is it almost is giving people permission to, it's okay to want a roadmap. It's
Mhm.
okay to want some steps, a process, because that's another thing we've learned from diet culture. I mean, that's what every diet and program is. You follow these rules, you get this result. And
Right.
so there's just kind of some natural human behavior that goes with like, I want to know how to do this. Give me
Mhm.
the steps. But then, like you said, one thing that dieting and diet culture and all those programs get wrong is they're expecting the same result no matter who the person is. And that's one of the things that I absolutely love about intuitive eating, but there's also kind of this misconception with intuitive eating in that it's just willy-nilly, just, listen to your
Mhm.
body and you'll know what to eat. When you're just coming out of dieting, you are not going to be able to listen to your body.
Yeah.
You don't know what subtle hunger feels like, or you
Right.
don't even haven't even thought about satisfaction since you started dieting, and or you've gotten the pretend diet watered down fat-free version of satisfaction or
Yeah.
carb-free version of satisfaction, and it's hard to listen to your fullness. So to let people know that, especially for folks that are just learning about this or just starting, or maybe they've hit that space again, it's midlife, it's unraveling, they're like, I don't want to do it the same way anymore, to think about, well, how do you transition into intuitive eating? There can absolutely be a step-by-step process, a roadmap to help you get started. But then also know, at least in my opinion, intuitive eating is the very essence of holistic health,
Mhm. Mhm.
because it is asking you, there are components to intuitive eating that is asking you to reflect on, how are each one of these steps working for you in your life, your unique lived experience? What do we need to tweak? Where more do you need support? So even if in, like, say, a group program, mine or yours, there's a roadmap that we're sharing with people, but then we're also asking people to assess, like, hey, what I don't know, tourist stops are you seeing along the way of your roadmap?
Mhm.
Where do you want to pull over? Where do you want to hang out for a while? And really kind of get into that step or make it work for your life. How can I support you in making that work better for your life? So that at the end, when they arrive at their destination, which to me with intuitive eating, we don't necessarily actually arrive, we just get better at our practice of intuitive eating, then that is a whole unique, um, I don't want to say program, I hate that word, but it becomes a new unique experience for them.
Right.
Now they are in a very different relationship with food, exercise, and their body, even though everybody walked through the same roadmap or took the same roadmap, but there were so many, like you said, different journeys along the way, little pit stops along the way that helped that person learn who they are, unravel themselves through the process. And then we arrived in a new relationship with food
Mhm.
and with some new skills to help continue to practice fostering this new relationship with food, which I think is really important. And it's important for people to understand, like, that's the point of intuitive eating. Whether you're following the 10 principles of intuitive eating or you're following an interpretation of intuitive eating, a non-diet interpretation of intuitive eating, because diet
Yes.
culture has
Yes.
co-opted
Has
intuitive eating, and
co-opted it.
we got to be real explicit about that.
Yeah.
And so to invite people also to do their homework with, when they think you want to look for that roadmap, you want to look for that support system to help you on your intuitive eating journey, really dive into the behind the scenes of, is this really coming from an undieting, non-diet perspective of intuitive eating too? That's really key. It's important to mention.
Definitely.
Deanna, where can people learn more about you, Tony, your work, and the roadmap that you create for folks?
I think probably the best way is to read Tony's book. He wrote a book about our formula. It's called idealbodyformula.com, where you can go and actually download that book for free. Now, I always have to say this because we say ideal body, but we don't mean societal's ideal. We have redefined what the ideal body means for us. And to us, the ideal body is the body that you're in when you have your healthiest relationship with food, with your body, with exercise, and with your mind. So, if you go to idealbodyformula.com, you can download his book and read just read our formula. Like he put it all out there for everybody. He's an amazing writer. It's my favorite thing about what he does. And so that's a great place to start. And also our podcast, Fitness and Sushi, he and I co-host that together. We have a lot of fun. It's a fun way to come in and hear about how to heal your relationship with food, body, exercise, and mind. And we have new episodes every week. And we also have guests like Amanda on our podcast every week too. So you can hear her there. So, and then builtdaily.com, if you just want to check out what we have to offer, check out our program, schedule a call with me. That's probably the best way to do that.
Perfect. We will put links to all of that in the show notes. And it's just been so much fun to learn more about you and your journey and the work that you're doing in the world. And again, like I said at the beginning of the show, and I think it's really important to reiterate, when you're looking for someone to work with to help support you in your unraveling from diet culture, doing it with someone who has already done their own unraveling can have a profound impact on someone's creating a new relationship with food, exercise, and their body. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your experience. This has just been a fantastic conversation, and folks may see us showing up together in another way sometime in the future. So thanks again, Deanna. I really appreciate our conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.